Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 79 based on novel. So let's start. Zhongli, do you really think that if you break through the 9-star and half emperor, you can escape from my palm? I told you 2 years ago that you will fall into my hand someday. What's the matter? Now my words are finally effective. Mu Han's face was ferocious, and a pair of turbid old eyes contained a few resentments that wanted to bite people. Had it not been for the clock in front of him, Xiao Yan would have died at his hands, and the emperor robbed Dan would have fallen into his hands. But everything went well, and finally he would be defeated by the sudden rush of Zhongli, which made Mu Han hate from the beginning to now. For Mu Han's words full of resentment, Zhongli didn't respond at all. It was like he was dead. Of course, if it weren't for the faint smell revealed in the blur, he would really be mistaken for a dead man. After hearing the words in Mu Han's mouth, many people in the crowd could not help shaking their heads and sighing. Who could have thought that even the semi-emperor strong as 9 stars would face the end of death in front of Mu Han? It is really unimaginable that Mu Han is strong. The strong man of the same level, Mu Han will no longer take it to heart. It can be said that today's Mu Han can really be called the strongest man under the fighting emperor. Remember, you have to die today. If you want to blame yourself, you can only blame yourself. Who let you mind your own business? I really think I'm strong. I'm going to tell all of you today that I can kill the 9-star and half emperor as well. The voice fell, Mu Han's big sleeve waved suddenly, and a terrible golden fighting spirit burst out in an instant. It turned into a gold knife in the void and cut the clock away in the cage. However, the next moment, when the people saw a 9-star and a half emperor strong man dying in front of them, on the huge square, they suddenly thought of 2 breaking rumors. With the wind, the 2 lights quickly shot out of the crowd like lightning. In a flash of lightning, they immediately cut off the golden dagger. At the next moment, people in public looked intently. In their sight, 2 figures were standing outside the cage, staring at Mu Han with a bad face, as if they were going to rob the Dharma field. But when Mu Han saw these 2 people, a sneer of disdain appeared on his fierce face, because they were not others, but Guli Kai Phosphorus of the Medicine Refining Association. Guli Kai Phosphorus, it's you again. You 2 old friends fought against me everywhere with Ju Tai. They showed mercy to you 2 years ago. Do you really think I dare not kill you? Hearing Mu Han's cold cry, Jiu Li's 2 faces changed slightly, but the body in front of Mu Han didn't move at all. Mu Han, anyway, we must take this man today. If you want to kill us, just try. The red phosphorus tone was also not weak. He shouted coldly at Mu Han. At the same time, the fighting spirit in their bodies was also raised in an instant and vowed to fight with Mu Han. Since you want to die, you can't blame me. With a sharp drink, Mu Han's body suddenly flashed, and his fighting spirit condensed in the palm. He had fought with Jiu Li the next moment. The crowd outside looked at the 3 people who had fought in the square at the moment. Their faces were not worried, but excited. They had seen the 8-star and half emperor level war, but they were really excited when they saw the 9-star semi-emperor strong for the first time. However, with the passage of time, the war in the field has gradually stepped into a white-hot stage. As a 9-star and half emperor, the main reason why Mu Han failed to defeat Jiu Li in a short time last time is that he had some concerns in his heart and failed to give full play to his strength. However, this time, Mu Han's men were merciless, fierce and ruthless. However, in a short moment, Jiu Li's joint offensive showed signs of imminent defeat. Sure enough, after a fierce collision, Mu Han put his palms together and blew Jiu Li out with a bang. Jiu Li was injured and left. He stopped hard, and the cold laughter that he despised came out again. Just because you, 2 vassals, gave Ju Tai face last time, so you didn't do your best. I didn't expect you to take it seriously. Since you came to die in person today, I accepted it impolitely. The voice fell, and Mu Han moved fiercely. In a twinkling, he had come to Jiu Li's 2 people. His palms moved together and printed hard on their chests. No, get back. Feeling the menace of the oncoming terror, Jiu Li and Li immediately couldn't help crying out. At the same time, they moved and stepped back quickly, trying to escape the attack range of Mu Han. However, Mu Han sneered again, and a sarcastic smile was aroused at the corners of his mouth. He sneered and said, do you want to run? Can you run? The cold laughter fell, and Mu Han's body shook violently again. The fighting spirit in his body surged wildly, and the speed of Mu Han's forward rush also soared again. In the twinkling of an eye, Mu Han's body was close to Jiu Li's two people who were retreating rapidly again. As soon as his hands and wrists turned, two dry palms full of momentum blasted on their chests in the frightened eyes of Jiu Li and red phosphorus. Bang! Suddenly, the fighting spirit of terror poured out madly, and rushed into the two people's bodies without obstruction, raging madly in the two people's bodies. Pooh! With the sound of two mouths spraying blood, Jiu Li's two mouths sprayed blood without money. They dyed the broken clothes on their body surfaces red. Their breath fell down in an instant, and their bodies flew out uncontrollably, like two vented leather balls, which fell on the square below. The moment they fell to the ground, they couldn't help gushing a mouthful of blood again. Their faces quickly became as pale as paper, and their breath fell to the bottom of the valley. At the moment, they were completely seriously injured. Seeing the two 8.5-star emperors, they were seriously injured by Mu Han and couldn't move in such a short time. The people outside couldn't help showing a look of horror on their faces, and they were shocked by Mu Han's terrible strength. The 9.5-star emperor is really terrible. Even the 8.5-star emperor, who is usually high above, looks so fragile in front of him. In this case, it's hard to imagine how terrible Mu Han's strength will be if he cooperates with the array on the premise that Mu Han doesn't use the array. Jiu Li was defeated. Mu Han also lowered his body slowly from high above, stood in the middle of the square, stepped on the cage made of special materials, looked around at the people around, and then said slowly in a cold tone, I'm going to kill all 3 people here today. If anyone here wants to save them, just come. I'll kill as many as I come. Oh, I haven't seen you for 2 years. Master Mu Han is still elegant. He is still bullying and bullying. However, just after the words in Mu Han's mouth fell, an understatement, cold voice without any emotion, sounded leisurely between heaven and earth. The next moment, Mu Han's face suddenly changed. In a pair of turbid old eyes, there was a look of horror, and his heart was full of disbelief. Rock Owl. It was not until a long time later that Mu Han's mouth trembled and spit out the name that was almost buried in the bottom of his heart by the people present. Hehe, it seems that Master Mu's memory is not bad. I still remember. The faint cold laughter still floated between the heaven and earth, but Xiao Yan still disappeared. Wow! When the name of the rock owl spread, there was an uproar among the crowd outside the square. The whole audience immediately became an uproar. At this moment, the name that shocked the whole wild ancient city 2 years ago was finally dug out from their deep-buried memory. Rock Owl. It's Rock Owl. Doesn't it mean that he was killed by Master Mu as early as 2 years ago? How can he live now? Cut. There was a news that the Rock Owl died at the beginning, but he didn't say that he must have died in Mu Han's hand. It's so dangerous in the empty thunder pool. Maybe he entered a place where Mu Han didn't dare to enter. Yes, I've heard that the core of the empty thunder pool is the most terrible place in the whole thunder pool. Ordinary semi-emperor strong people don't dare to touch the thunder there. Even Mu Han, who is a 9-star semi-emperor, doesn't dare to step there. Maybe the original Rock Owl didn't die, but entered there to temporarily avoid Mu Han. Tut. So, didn't the Rock Owl really stay for 2 years in the core of the thunder pool where even the 9.5 emperors dare not step easily? God, how did this guy do it? At the same time, Guli Kai Phosphorus, who had been seriously injured, finally struggled to get up, listened to the familiar voice in their ears, and 2 pairs of turbid old eyes kept scanning the surrounding sky. Cough. Rock Owl, he's really alive. Ha, you can't be wrong. This voice is definitely the boy. It turns out that he's really not dead. Ha. There's no unique way. Now let's see what Mu Han should do. Hearing Xiao Yang's familiar voice, Jiu Li and his 2 people suddenly showed a surprised look on their faces and looked at each other. The big stone hanging in their hearts finally fell at the moment. For a moment, what happened to Xiao Yang in the empty thunder pool 2 years ago was boiling in the crowd again. Although it had been 2 years, even now, in retrospect, there was still a feeling like the next day in the hearts of the people present. Rock Owl, you are not dead. Mu Han's face was gloomy, and he could not help but show a touch of horror. He raised his eyes, constantly scanned the sky above his head, and said sternly in his mouth. Mu Han has always been skeptical about Xiao Yang's death. Even though Xiao Yang has disappeared for 2 years, he still can't believe it easily. Xiao Yang's generation is the favorite of heaven and the dragon of man. Even if he has to praise, how can he die so easily? Even if he entered the deep pit with serious injury, as long as he didn't see Xiao Yang die with his own eyes, he should never make a conclusion. Today, the doubt in his heart was finally concluded. Xiao Yang was not dead. Hehe, it seems that in the past 2 years, Master Mu has been very concerned about me. In the next 2 years, he has been remembering your great kindness to me every day. I just don't know whether Master Mu is the one who cares about me, or the Emperor Robbery Pill." With the cold laughter in Xiao Yang's mouth falling, a light flashed across the sky. Xiao Yang's body shape had been standing in the air above Mu Han's head, with his arms around his chest and a cold face. When they saw this scene, they looked a little chilly in their eyes. Xiao Yang stood on Mu Han's head as soon as he appeared, which was undoubtedly beating Mu Han's face in public. Mu Han saw this, the look on an old face suddenly became gloomy, the dry palm under the sleeve robe slowly clenched, the anger rose in his eyes, and he felt extremely angry at Xiao Yang's action in his heart. After a long time, Mu Han raised a very cold smile at the corners of his mouth. With a ferocious face, he raised his head, stared at Xiao Yang in the sky, and said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Ha ha! I almost thought you were dead, but fortunately, you didn't disappoint me. Since you sincerely asked, I'll tell you that today, it's not just your rock owl's life, the Emperor Robbery Pill in your hand, including everything you have. I took it for you." At the moment when the voice fell, Mu Han suddenly stepped on the cage under his feet, and the terrible strength poured out. Then, the cage made of special metal materials was shocked, and the terrible force poured down along the golden cage. The gravel ground under the cage collapsed again. The whole golden cage immediately fell into the earth, and the surrounding ground also expanded and opened wide cracks like cobwebs. At the same time, Mu Han's body also burst out in an instant, breaking through the void. Before everyone outside responded, he had come to Xiao Yang. The clenched fist suddenly bent open, and the 5 fingers bent into claws. The golden fighting spirit condensed into slender cones at the fingertips, and then shook his arm. With a terrible fierce wind, he grabbed Xiao Yang's head. Where the claws pass, the empty space is like a thin piece of paper, which is ruthlessly torn apart. The harsh sound of sonic boom rings around the ears. The sharp claws have come to Xiao Yang's face. The fierce wind contained in it stabbed the skin on Xiao Yang's face very painful. Seeing that Xiao Yang had no action under his own attack, even more like he didn't react at all, Mu Han couldn't help but tighten his heart slightly. Based on his understanding of Xiao Yang now, he was definitely not a mediocre person. Xiao Yang could avoid his several fierce attacks 2 years ago. 2 years later, Xiao Yang was afraid he wouldn't be bad. What's more, Xiao Yang can still control the power of space on the Void Avenue. Once he displays it, even at such a close distance at the moment, Xiao Yang can also avoid it. Whoosh dash. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yang didn't show his vanity road. He didn't want to expose his cards too much when necessary. It's not good for him. With the sound of a sharp breaking wind, Xiao Yang's body has appeared hundreds of feet away. A pair of dark eyes of Jiyu Jing are slowly raised to look at Mu Han, and their eyes are filled with cold. 9 stars and a half emperors reached their peak in the later period. In 2 years, you are not standing still. Xiao Yang said indifferently. However, compared with Xiao Yang, Mu Han's face suddenly coagulated, and his heart suddenly raised a deep color of horror. He didn't expect that Xiao Yang could grow to such a level in 2 years. What did he do in the past 2 years? Did you devour all the thunder in the thunder pool? After a long time, Mu Han looked up at Xiao Yang with a frightened face. The expression on his face was a little stiff because of the horror in his heart. His mouth opened slightly dry. Then his voice said dryly and hard, 5 star and a half emperor, how possible? Mu Han's voice fell, and immediately caused a burst of startled cries in the whole square. Everyone looked at Xiao Yang in horror, and his face showed a deeply unbelievable look. Among those present, those who knew the name of Yang Xiao knew clearly that when Xiao Yang's name was rising in the wild ancient city 2 years ago, his strength was only 3.5 emperors. At that time, although he had the strength to compare with the 8 star and a half emperor, it was only after using his terrible means, but now, he can easily avoid Mu Han's lightning attack, and his strength is even more amazing. He has reached the level of terror of the 5 star and a half emperor. 2 years, enhance the strength of the 2 stars. Do you really think it's fighting the king and the emperor? Seeing Xiao Yang's strength, the muscles on their faces couldn't help twitching, and they thought in horror. If today's Xiao Yang only has the strength of fighting the king or the emperor, it is common to improve the strength of the 2 stars in 2 years, but the key is that today's Xiao Yang is a powerful semi-emperor. The strength of 1 star is improved every year, and it is still a semi-emperor strong person. Even if you look at the whole Yuanwu continent, you can't say that there must be no, but even if there is, it can definitely be called a rare existence. But now, the guy with such terrible cultivation talent appears in front of them alive. How can this calm these people's hearts? Oh, I remember telling you that nothing is impossible. If you have to stubbornly think it is impossible, then I can only tell you that this is only your wishful thinking. You think it is impossible because you are ignorant and ignorant. In the face of Mu Han's slightly questioning voice, Xiao Yang put his hands around his chest and sneered at the cold voice in his mouth. Asshole. Smelly boy, don't think you can compare with me when your strength is increased to 5-star and half Emperor. Today I'll tell you what the gap is. The strength of 9-star and half Emperor is definitely not something you can make up for with tough fighting skills. With a cold drink, Mu Han suddenly moved his body on the void, and rushed towards Xiao Yang with a lightning speed. Oh! If my speed was only comparable to yours 2 years ago, do you think my speed will be comparable to yours 2 years later? As soon as Xiao Yang's voice fell, Mu Han came to Xiao Yang with a fierce face. His claws raised and crossed Xiao Yang's shoulder in an instant, directly penetrating Xiao Yang's body. Huh! The look in Mu Han's eyes coagulated again. Xiao Yang, whose lips and teeth were still moving, was just a remnant. At the next moment, Xiao Yang's body appeared in the void in the distance again. It can be seen that although Xiao Yang avoided Mu Han's claw, his black robe was slightly broken. It seems that he did not escape Mu Han's attack 100%. Xiao Yang looked down at the broken black robe on his eyes and frowned slightly. If he reacted more slowly just now, this claw really had to fall on him. It seems that it's still a little too big. Xiao Yang sighed secretly in his heart, but he gradually became cautious. Anyway, he is facing the 9-star and half Emperor at the moment. If he dares to face it with an ordinary heart, Xiao Yang is afraid that he will inevitably fall down. When the thought just flashed through Xiao Yang's heart, Mu Han changed the formula in his hand, and the terrible soul power in the center of his eyebrows suddenly surged out, quickly condensing several powerful terrorist arrays between heaven and earth. At the moment of the completion of the array cohesion, the energy of heaven and earth was also rapidly condensed in the array. After a burst of violent tremor, the dazzling golden thunder burst out in an instant and hit Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang's face was slightly cold. His steps changed. Tianjue's step was displayed in an instant. His body flashed again and disappeared into the void. Whoosh dash. However, the next moment, when Xiao Yang had just manifested himself from the void, the figure of Mu Han had appeared in front of him, his claws waved suddenly, and in a moment he had reached Xiao Yang's head. Feeling the terror of the air raid above his head, Xiao Yang's hair suddenly stood up. He didn't want to think about it. The blood of the dragon phoenix in his body was instantly excited, and his arms turned into dragon claws. His arms crossed and lifted up, quickly blocking his head. Bang! With a violent muffled sound, Xiao Yang quickly withdrew from the 100-step distance uncontrollably. At the moment of looking up, Mu Han followed up again, and the fierce claw wind hit again. Go! Xiao Yang saw this, but he was angry in his heart. His body method moved. Tianjue's step was displayed in an instant and retreated 100 feet. At the same time, his big sleeve was waved suddenly, and a black light tore the void in an instant. In a moment, he had collided with Mu Han. Boom! With a violent roar, Mu Han's face suddenly changed and his body flew out of control. It was also after 100 feet that he could stabilize his body. He raised his eyes solemnly. Opposite him, Beiwang was standing impressively. His towering body was like an iron tower, giving people an unshakable sense of vision. This puppet's strength, how also? 9 stars and a half emperors. His eyes stared at the North King. After a long time, Mu Han finally had a convulsive face and couldn't help crying out. A puppet at the level of 9 stars and half emperors. If this is combined with Xiao Yang's own strength, how terrible it should be. Damn! Not only does this boy's own strength advance by leaps and bounds, but he can't imagine that even the puppet's strength has grown to such a degree. Who is this boy? At this moment, not only Mu Han, but also Luo Jin, who was standing outside the court, couldn't help but be shocked after seeing the amazing strength of the North King. Unexpectedly, in the past 2 years, not only Xiao Yang's strength has been greatly improved, but even his puppet is so strong. 2 years ago, the puppet's strength was only 6-star and half emperor. 2 years ago, it reached the level of 9-star and half emperor. If you say, the growth rate of the North King is even more terrible than his master. This guy, where on earth did he come from? In this regard, Luo Jin also deserves a helpless wry smile. I thought he needed to come forward this time, but at the moment, it's not necessary. Alas. With him as a puppet, it seems that I don't have to show up. This guy is still amazing as usual. Luo Jin sighed and shook his head. In this situation, He really doesn't need to do it. Hehe, it seems that the young lord also wants a hero to save the disaster. Unfortunately, he met the rock owl. Hearing Luo Jin's words, Shenlaro also joked and laughed, but then he said, however, Mu Han is not so easy to deal with. Even the 9-star and half-emperor doesn't have enough strength to compete with him. Isn't Zhong Li the best example? Luo Jin nodded, but his eyes were fixed on Xiao Yang in the field. He always felt that since Xiao Yang had shot, he absolutely had a winning mentality. Just investigate the reason. At the moment, he still didn't know. Boy, you really surprised me, but do you really think you can compete with me just by a puppet of the 9-star and half-emperor? Mu Han's dark eyes narrowed slowly, and his fierce eyes stared at the North King. There was a little fear between his looks, but there was a touch of ridicule at the corners of his lips. A moment later, Mu Han looked at Xiao Yang. The cold words were still full of disdain and sneer. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang grinned. Mu Han knew his roots. Similarly, Xiao Yang also knew Mu Han's tricks. What he could use to deal with the 9-star and half-emperor was nothing more than his array. In addition, there were also his own strength factors. If these things had been put 2 years ago, Xiao Yang was naturally afraid of Mu Han, but now things have changed. It has been 2 years later. Now when he faces Mu Han again, Xiao Yang has no fear at all. As far as he is concerned, Mu Han today is just a 9-star and a half-emperor. At most, he is only a little stronger than ordinary strong people at the same level, but this is not the reason for Xiao Yang to bow his head. Oh, well, since you are so confident in your strength, let me try this puppet to see if you are as confident as you say. Cold laughter fell, and Xiao Yang's heart moved. When Bei Wang Dun stepped on the void fiercely, the void burst under his feet. At the same time, Bei Wang's body turned into a dark shell and rushed towards the wood in an instant. With a strong body like an iron tower, he mercilessly tore up the void. His broad palm suddenly clenched into a fist while rushing forward. In a twinkling of an eye, the North King had appeared on Mu Han's side. His huge iron fist crushed the void and blasted up Mu Han's face. Sharp-mouthed boy, I really thought I would be afraid of you. However, Mu Han didn't care about it. With a cold hum, his body turned around, and his dry palm also welcomed the oncoming North King. Bang! After a violent muffled sound, the North King and Mu Han retreated 100 feet each. This first time, Mu Han and the North King were even. When people outside the square saw this scene, their faces were even more shocked. They really didn't expect that the strength of a puppet could be equal to the real 9-star and half-emperor strong. They really saw such a terrible puppet in their life. Above the void, Luo Jin and Shenlaro on one side stared at the North King in the field. Xuanlao's eyes showed a deep, dignified look. The strength of the North King, even he, might not be his opponent. Tut tut. The puppet of the rock owl is really frightening. A puppet who can grow to such a level, does he come from? The murmur in Xuanlao's mouth had not been completely spit out, but Luo Jin on one side waved his hand gently and motioned him not to go on. Seeing this, Shenlaro hurriedly took back the words he wanted to export when he had reached his mouth. Luo Jin narrowed his eyes and stared at the North King who collided with Mu Han again. The jade fan in his hand fanned slowly. A moment later, Luo Jin said, I went to Grandpa 5 about him. He obviously knows something, but he didn't say it clearly. If you want to know his details, you'd better wait for him. If we ask more, it's not good. Shenlaro nodded gently. He respected his 5th master very much. Since Luo Ao was unwilling to disclose Xiao Yang's information, they naturally didn't need to ask more. I'm just a little curious. Who on earth are you? It can make those guys so interested in you. What great secret is hidden in you? Xiao Yang. Bang. In a short moment, Mu Han and the North King have had hundreds of rounds of confrontation, which makes the faces of the people outside the field look extremely frightened. However, the war in the field is still high and low. Above the void, Mu Han stared at the North King opposite with a dignified face. The strength of the puppet in front of him was indeed beyond his imagination. Ordinary means could not break the terrible body of the North King. Even with some high-level fighting skills, Mu Han could not win the North King in a short time. I underestimate you. Unexpectedly, after 2 years, your puppet is more difficult than it was at the beginning. But it seems that you only deserve to hide behind this puppet. Mu Han swept the North King with dignified eyes, and then fell on Xiao Yang in the rear. He said sarcastically in his mouth, Oh, ridiculous, you are a 9-star and a half-emperor, but you always say these ridiculous words. Don't you feel ashamed of your old face? In the face of Mu Han's sarcastic words, Xiao Yan couldn't help but sneer, and a sneer of disdain arose from the corners of his mouth. His eyes were full of mockery. What a sharp-mouthed smelly boy. I want to see what you can do without this puppet today. As soon as the voice fell, Mu Han suddenly burst out in his body. He raised his hands and made a quick seal in his hands. At the same time, he shouted fiercely, "Golden array field. Open." At the command, Mu Han's feet immediately spread a circle of golden light array, which quickly spread around. The field spread and covered the whole square under it. Then Mu Han's printing formula changed rapidly, and the whole field also twisted. In the twinkling of an eye, it condensed into more than 10 different arrays. The array was condensed and Mu Han's body shape was a flash. With the momentum of lightning, it turned into a golden thunder and lightning, and quickly shot at Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang couldn't help sneering. His heart moved. The North King rushed to Mu Han and wanted to stop him. Seeing the North King attacking again, Mu Han's mouth aroused a sneer. Instead of turning back to defense, he suddenly soared again at the forward speed and stepped away to the front of the North King. At this time, the North King just flashed behind Mu Han and flashed back at Mu Han's vest. Bang! However, the North King's powerful palm finally landed on a suddenly rising barrier. The golden light rose and condensed into a cylindrical cage, trapping the North King. Although the North King's offensive was extremely terrible, it could not break through the defense of the cage in a short time. Moreover, under the bombardment of the Northern King, in a short time, not only did he not break the array in front of him, but he was also rebounded by the power of the array. For a time, the array and the puppets fought against each other, forming an extremely ingenious balance. Trapped God Array? Xiao Yang frowned when he saw this. He was puzzled about the suddenly raised array. Although it looked like a trapped God Array, the power released from it was very different from the trapped God Array Xiao Yang saw at the beginning. Moreover, this array is much weaker than the trapped God Array that trapped Jiu Li 2 years ago. At least, the real trapped God Array will not be easily shaken like this array at the moment. However, while Xiao Yang was thinking about the array, Mu Han didn't give him any extra time. At the moment after the North King was trapped by the array, Mu Han's speed of rushing forward soared again. In a moment, he had come to Xiao Yang. When Xiao Yang regained his mind to the extreme, Mu Han was also impolite. He waved his big hand and grasped it out of thin air in the void. The fighting spirit in the palm of his hand immediately condensed rapidly. In the twinkling of an eye, it has condensed into a broad and strong giant sword. The palm of his hand slammed on the handle of the sword, and the giant sword shot out at Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang sneered. It was also a call with a big hand. Different fire gushed out in the palm of his hand and condensed into a huge ruler of fire. When the giant ruler waved, the sound of breaking the air suddenly sounded. Xiao Yang was unwilling to show weakness. As soon as he turned his right hand, he grabbed the giant ruler and waved his arm. The giant ruler swept Lun Fei out and roared with the giant sword in the front. Bang! The two collided, and then they were broken together. With the sweeping of a fighting storm, Xiao Yang's eyes narrowed. His sight was temporarily blocked by the fog brought by the storm, and he couldn't see it clearly. But at the moment, Xiao Yang's face changed suddenly. His eyes fell at his feet, but he didn't know when a huge array had appeared. At the moment, Xiao Yang was in the center of the array. Xiao Yang wanted to be surprised. However, at this time, the voice of Mu Han's cold words suddenly came out. Trapped God Array, Qi. Trapped God Array, Qi. With a cold cry with a mocking tone coming out, the field under Xiao Yang's feet spread in circles like ripples. The ripples spread and finally centered on Xiao Yang. In the void where he was, they condensed into a semicircular array with a diameter of 100 feet. As soon as the array came out, Xiao Yang's face couldn't help changing slightly. Because the array enveloping Xiao Yang at the moment is the real trapped God array that Xiao Yang thought of just now. This array is a terrible array that trapped the 9-star and half emperor. Gaga, gaga. Now, without the puppet, I want to see what tricks you can play. It's impossible to break my trapped God array with your strength. A breeze blew, and the thick fog dispersed. Mu Han's figure slowly stepped out of the thick fog, stood dozens of feet away from Xiao Yang, and looked at Xiao Yang with a sneer. In this regard, Xiao Yang smiled faintly. He looked around and observed the trapped God array. After a moment, he couldn't help nodding and was greatly praised in his heart. Under the exploration of Xiao Yang's terrible soul power, this trapped God array is indeed quite extraordinary. Compared with the array formed by 300 arrays 2 years ago, this trapped god array is more arrogant and domineering. It is not only a single array disk that condenses the array, but also releases more powerful power. This is not the problem of the number of arrays. The reason depends on the strength of the array itself. Of course, Xiao Yan knows very little about the array. Therefore, as for the more exact reason, I'm afraid he can only understand it when he contacts more in the future. As for the moment, although the trapped god array is indeed known as a defense array that can't be broken even by the 9-star and half emperor, it doesn't have any deterrent for today's Xiao Yan. However, compared with Xiao Yan in the field at the moment, all the people outside the field showed extremely shocked expressions on their faces, especially when they saw the trapped god array. The shocked look on their faces only increased. God. This is the trapped god array. This is Mu She's housekeeping method. It is said that Mu She once trapped a 9-star and a half emperor. If Mu She had not softened his heart and let him go, I'm afraid he would still be in the trapped god array until now. Unexpectedly, Mu She even took it out to deal with the rock owl today. Cut, what you said was a long time ago. I saw with my own eyes that Master Mu trapped a 9-star and a half emperor with the trapped god array. The crowd continued to marvel at the trapped god array, and some people boasted about the terrible achievements they had seen with their own eyes. Although the words were true and false, they did attract the attention of many people. Seeing this, the man also showed a proud smile on his face, as if he were the protagonist in the war. Well, it's him, Zhongli. I was lucky to see Master Mu when I passed a mountain a year ago. Although I only looked at him from a distance, he was a strong man after all, and we can't touch him at will, but I can see clearly that his array is the current trapped god array. Zhongli was in the array at that time. No matter how hard he tried, trapped god array but still motionless. Although it's simple, it's not difficult for everyone to hear how terrible the trapped god array is. Even the 9-star and half emperor can't break it by force. Isn't it even more impossible for Xiao Yang in front of you? The most unimaginable thing is that in order to deal with Xiao Yang, a 5-star and half emperor, Mu Han, as a 9-star and half emperor, unexpectedly took out one of his cards, the trapped god array. If it is spread, regardless of the victory or defeat of the war, the name of the rock owl will be spread again in the wild ancient city. Of course, they think so only because they don't understand Xiao Yang's real strength. Xiao Yang, who has 2 kinds of anti-heaven magic skills of Chenjue Step and Void Avenue, is almost sure of winning in the face of Mu Han in terms of speed. Therefore, if Mu Han fails to lock Xiao Yang in a certain range in time, it is very likely that he will never hurt Xiao Yang. The result of this delay will not only ruin Mu Han's reputation, but also make Xiao Yang famous again. This is not the result Mu Han wants to see. Therefore, if he can use a moment of disrespect, in exchange for his future reputation and status, Mu Han believes that it is also worth it. However, while Mu Han in the field had a small calculation in his heart, Luo Jin and Shen Laro outside the field would not think so. Now Xiao Yang, in Luo Jin's heart, after the rendering of the double mystery of Aoki and Luo Ao, he is no longer just a semi-imperial strongman with slightly stronger strength. What's more, Xiao Yang is also related to the Ghost Gate, which makes Luo Jin dare not underestimate Xiao Yang's real strength. In today's Luo Jin's eyes, Xiao Yang is at least a super strong man above the fighting emperor level. Even if he doesn't have that strength, Luo Jin believes that Xiao Yang has the ability to burst out that powerful strength, that kind of terrorist strength enough to move Luo and Aoki. In the field, Xiao Yang slowly raised his eyes and looked at Mu Han opposite. However, his eyes looked very dull and did not set off a ripple because of the current situation. When Mu Han saw this, he not only showed a sneer, but he didn't think that without Xiao Yang after the North King, he could break through his trapped god array with his own strength. Gaga, I let you run last time. It was my fault, but I will never let you escape this time. I will not only kill you to get the Emperor robbery pill, but also your puppet. Mu Han's cold eyes looked at the North King who was about to break through the array outside the array. His scarlet tongue licked his thin lips like a blade, and smiled in yin pity. Even Mu Han, a puppet at the level of the North King, has to be moved by it. After all, if he can get the North King, he will no longer be afraid of any strong person under the fighting emperor. At that time, even in the face of 3 9-star and half emperors at the same time, he will also have the ability to protect himself. Haha, there's so much nonsense. Isn't it just to kill me so that I can get everything? Hearing Mu Han's words, Xiao Yang sneered with disdain on his face. When Mu Han heard the speech, a fierce color reappeared on his old face, and the corners of his mouth grinned. Sen Bai's suppression was full of Sen cold luster, and he sneered at Xiao Yang. Smelly boy, you dare to talk big when you are dying. I have a trapped god array today. Even if you bear the Void Avenue, you will be doomed. Rock Owl, die obediently. The voice fell and Mu-Han moved. With the breaking wind of Ling Lai, Mu-Han rushed towards Xiao Yang in an instant. Noisy. Xiao Yang uttered a word calmly. His face had not changed at all because of Mu-Han's rapid approach. His body stood upright and looked at Mu-Han coming from the storm. Xiao Yang even said slowly and lazily, "Little guy, come out and play." As soon as Xiao Yang's voice fell, he paused for a moment. The void in front of Xiao Yang was torn by an unknown force, and then a golden light came out of it, facing Mu-Han. It's Kim. This video will end here.